Hello people, I am Jaby Koay, joined by Achara KIRK.
Hello.
We're looking at GUNJAN SAXENA, the Kargil, is it Kargil or Kargil? Kargil Girl, official trailer, Netflix India, and I'm sure there are 27,000 comments already about how to pronounce Kargil. So, is it Jimmy Shergill or Shergill? Shergill?
Shergill.
Shergill. So it's Kargil.
Kargil.
Go.
अगर एयर फोर्स ज्वाइन करना है तो फौजी बनकर दिखाओ वरना घर जाकर बेलन चलाओ हमारी जिम्मेदारी है इस देश की रक्षा करना तुम्हें बराबरी का मौका देना नहीं
दादा मुझे पायलट बनना है
लड़कियां पायलट नहीं बनती
देखो प्लेन लड़का उड़ाए या लड़की दोनों को पायलट ही बोलते हैं
देखो जी बचपना छोड़ दे ठीक है तू पहले पढ़ाई पे ध्यान दे फिर देखेंगे बात
दादा आपने आर्मी ज्वाइन किया ना सिर्फ मैं पायलट नहीं बन सकती
पायलट तो बन कर रहेगी
आप मेरी तरफ है कि उसकी
हम तो इस तरफ हैं बेटा जो लोग मेहनत का साथ नहीं छोड़ते किस्मत कभी उनका हाथ नहीं छोड़ता
I always hate that exercise, looking at it.
The jumping jacks?
The mud,
or
the mud. The mud. Like, I just never like looking at it.
टेक ऑफ का टाइम आ गया
Because I put myself in that position, I'm like, that seems gross.
गुंजन सक्सेना
कमांडिंग ऑफिसर पहले पहुंचता है तुम लेट
सर वो ओवरऑल चेंज करने की जगह
बैग पे चेंज कर लेती
Damn.
बहुत ढूंढा मैंने लेकिन लेडीज टॉयलेट मिला
नहीं क्योंकि लेडीज टॉयलेट है ही नहीं
क्यों सर
क्योंकि ये जगह लेडीज के लिए बनी ही नहीं है
आपको क्या प्रॉब्लम है मुझसे सर
जानना चाहती हो क्या प्रॉब्लम है बेटा गो
इसमें क्या दिख रहा है
एयरफोर्स ऑफिसर्स
10 एयरफोर्स ऑफिसर्स और एक लड़की
फिर से
ये बेकार पायलट की जरूरत ना एयरफोर्स को है ना मेरी यूनिट को
फिर से तुम कमजोर हो गुंजन और डिफेंस में कमजोरी के लिए कोई जगह नहीं
बस एक बात कहनी थी पापा मैं आपको कभी हारने नहीं दूंगी
तुम कारगिल जा रही इस वक्त देश को अपने बेस्ट पायलट्स की जरूरत है जय हिंद
जय हिंद सर
रिटर्न बैक टू बेस एट 1 इट्स वेरी रिस्की तुमसे नहीं होगा कुछ
You go first.
I got a little bit teary-eyed watching that, just because, you know...
Well, you're supposed to.
Yeah, it did its job. It did its job really well. You see where it's gonna go, right? I mean, I suppose maybe not so much for us because we have no idea really who GUNJAN SAXENA is, but you can tell this is a story about someone who was told no a bunch of times and had to overcome a lot of difficulties in order to get to where she was, and then she finally succeeds. But I do have to say that the main selling point for me right now in seeing this trailer is the fact that Pankaj Tripathi is playing her dad.
Really?
And that gets me really excited.
That's the main selling point for you, not the story?
Well, the story as well, but like I really like him, and so I'm seeing him in this and I'm like, okay, he's like a really strong supporting character here, and I love anything where it's like a parent-child relationship thing, and it's really nice just to see a dad who's super supportive of his daughter doing something different, you know, and he's like a softer, kinder daddy. You know? Sure.
What's interesting is every time we see one of these stories, it's usually the dad who's the heart that's, that encouragement that's helping her to keep going forward. Generally speaking, I rarely see an instance where it's a mom, other than Secret Superstar,
right,
where the parent that's encouraging the child, the daughter, I should say, is it's rarely a mother. It's usually a father.
Right.
I just find that interesting. Not that there's anything wrong with that. Just thought I'd remark about that. And the only instance I can think of where I saw otherwise, it was Secret Superstar, where you had the mom who was the encouraging factor in the little girl's life. I don't think that was a true story, so it's fiction. It doesn't. Anyway, you look at Dangal, and it's obviously Amir Khan, who's
Yeah.
like the driving force there, right?
But he's much harder. Do you know what I mean? Like it wasn't so much in Dangal that the girls came to him and were like, "Hey, Dad, we really want to be wrestlers." It was more like he saw an opportunity to mold them to become really great wrestlers, and with his help, they got there. But here, you've got a girl who's like,
That bird.
I want to.
The father was like that. He was like.
Oh, that's right. Yeah,
you know?
you're absolutely right. Yeah,
I hope I'm saying that name correctly.
I feel like you
The
are.
slap, that one.
The-
This is the big slap.
Yeah, the big slap.
The least controversial film of the year, that one.
Yeah, that one.
But anyway, about this, like, I thought you were gonna comment on, I mean, it seemed like the obvious go-to thing, which was like the fact that it's a woman and it's a female-led story.
Well-
I totally thought that's where you were gonna go first.
And I appreciate that as well, and I appreciate kind of seeing all of the struggles that she had to go through, because it seems like they really didn't want her there. Like even something as simple as changing into your uniform that you take for granted that there would be a ladies' room or something that you would be able to do that, but instead they're basically doing everything in their power to make her feel unwelcome. And that scene where she had to do the arm wrestling,
yeah.
that was just heartbreaking, because it's just like, it's virtually impossible for her, especially at that time, I think, to be able to do that. Now, I don't know how many women can actually beat full-grown men in an arm wrestling competition like that.
Sorry, go ahead.
But my question is, what does that even have to do with being a good pilot?
Well, nothing. And it's just to humiliate her. That's
Yeah.
the point of that. There's a film, I may have mentioned this before in the previous reaction. There's a film with Cuba Gooding Jr. and Robert De Niro and Charlize Theron called Men of Honor. And it was where Cuba Gooding Jr. wanted to be a sailor. He was the first male black sailor. And he was put through the paces. He was tested hard, more than any white officer probably ever was. And that's part and parcel for when you're bearing the cross of being the first at something.
Right.
You're punished the most because they want to weed you out. They don't want you there. They're going to push you harder than they would push any normal person. And so that whole test with the arm wrestling, it's like, okay, bitch, how about put another one of your dudes in there, see how he does against arm wrestling everyone in the class. He's probably going to lose to a bunch of dudes as well.
Yeah.
Like, obviously, the point they're making is that she couldn't beat anybody in the class. But like you said, that has nothing to do with being a fighter pilot.
Yeah.
That has nothing to do with your peripheral skills and your ability to react and have good judgment. I mean,
Yeah.
that's literally a muscle contest. I mean, she was, again, bearing the cross of being the first, right? And so she had the toughest challenges in front of her. They didn't have a ladies' room because they weren't built for that. They didn't build in a ladies' room because no ladies were going out for that thing.
Right.
And, you know, men in that scenario are like, well, it's a men's club. And I really hate that fucking mentality. I think it's disgusting. Like, you shouldn't be part of this. It's like, if a girl genuinely wants to be part of something, then let her have a shot at it. As long as she's equipped to be as good as any of the dudes in terms of what is required to do that job, I'm personally perfectly fine with that. You know?
Yeah.
But there's an interesting YouTube video out there that y'all should watch that deals with this subject. It's a US Navy SEAL who talks about women and transgendered people who are interested in being a Navy SEAL. And he's actually against women and transgendered people being a Navy SEAL. But he has his reasons, and I don't know how I feel about them, but it's still an interesting video nonetheless. I'll find it and you guys can watch it in the there's a link in the description below.
Okay.
So it's just interesting topically. As far as the story goes, I find this to be very motivating. It's very inspiring.
Yeah.
Whether it is dealing with you being a minority in a world that is mostly populated by white males, or you being a woman in a world that's mostly populated by men, just being the outsider, trying to come in and do this thing that you're passionate about, where you're not welcomed at all.
Yeah, and what is it one of your friends said? That, you know, being a black man in this industry, he's always had to be better, bring his A game, be early, just like everything just to stand out. Whereas someone who is white or who is part of the group, part of the majority, they can get away with so much because they have less to prove.
Right. Well,
You
I mean,
know?
that was told to me also by an Asian actor, for the actor from Rising Sun and Dragon the Bruce Lee story. I forgot his name. He's a very recognizable face for people like me who grew up in the 90s. I met him at a commercial casting audition, and he said the exact same thing. Like, he had to be better than all the white actors in order to stand out, in order to get the part.
Right.
Otherwise, he was not, considered at all. What ends up happening, fortunately or unfortunately, is she ends up being better than all the male pilots.
Yeah, because she's
You
got
know?
so much more to prove, They're all like, oh, don't do it. And she's like, I know I can, so I'm gonna.
Yeah, this has been true throughout history, though. Like, in this country, there's this sort of stereotype and association with Jewish people and being lawyers, right?
Right.
But the reason why that happened was because, I think it was in the 50s, Jewish people were taking the cases that no one wanted. They were taking all the reject cases that people just didn't want to deal with. And as a result, they were doing all the most difficult cases and became the best lawyers, and then ended up becoming the lawyers and everybody wanted as a result.
Right.
I mean, there's sort of this notion that the reason why you have such great black athletes today is because of slavery, because they had to deal with all this shit that white people weren't doing because they had slaves. And so as a result, the most like elite black people continued to live on and pass on their genes
Right.
to other ones. And then like that's what you now like you look at sports, it's all black athletes, or mostly anyway,
In America.
in America, because I mean, look at who their ancestors were. They had to
fight.
just to survive, and with the worst of food. Is it any wonder that
Right. That's definitely an interesting theory.
I mean, I don't know if there's any truth to that theory. This is like, that was talked about in a Bill Burr thing, who got that from some other like thing, and so
Right.
That's anecdotal, and don't regard that as like, take that with a tiny grain of salt. But I'm just saying, a diamond is coming out of pressure here.
Exactly.
The way they put this together, it feels slightly cliche,
Yeah.
but it still worked on me. The phrase I'm trying to use isn't coming to mind right now, but basically I can see what's being done here. It's very obvious, the step-by-step sort of situation in order to elicit those feelings out of me, and yet it still worked. To say the least, I'm very, very interested in this and want to watch it, and I'm hoping that you guys do too. Do let me know your feelings about the acting, the story, if you find it inspiring. I'm sure there's a number of you watching that have relatives or parents or uncles or aunts maybe even who were in the military and could probably tell you if there's any truth to this, any validity to the way this story's being told at all. And I would love to hear from you guys in the comments below, because, obviously there's going to be a little bit of playing up the drama, a little bit of artistic licensing in order to tell a more effective, cohesive, emotional story.
Yeah.
One where you're like, you have this underdog who has a lot to overcome. Maybe it's exactly like how it happened. Maybe it's being kind to the actual story,
Yeah, who knows? I mean, they made a point of putting that right at the beginning of the trailer, basically.
What's that?
Like, oh, this is just based on a true story, but artistic licensing was taken.
Okay.
I'm paraphrasing, but that's pretty much what it said at the
Yeah.
beginning of the trailer, so.
So there you go. Let us know your feelings in the comments below. Thanks so much for hanging out. I'm Jaby Koay. This is
Achara KIRK.
Peace out.